Amen. So 2 Kings chapter 6, we got to jump in here so we can make some ground. Let's read this. It says that the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, "See now, the place where we are dwelling with you is too small for us. Please, let's go to the Jordan, and let every man take a beam from there, and let us make there a place where we may dwell." So he answered and said, "Go." And then in verse 3, one said, "Please, consent to go with your servants." And he answered, "I will go." So he went with them, and when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But in verse 5, one of them was cutting down a tree, and the iron axe head fell into the water, and he cried out, and he said, "Alas, master, for it was borrowed." So the man of God said, "Where did it fall?" And he showed him the place, so he cut off a stick, threw it in there, and he made the iron to float. Therefore he said, "Pick it up for yourself." And so he reached out his hand, and he took it up. Now, it's really hard to make an application of this axe head floating. It's just truly a miracle and an amazing thing. But it's the surrounding information that's really important to us as Christian people, as people of God's Word. Notice this with me, that in the days that we're reading about, the idolatry and the wickedness and the sin and the evil in Israel is rampant. It's like just horrible. It's out of control. And in the midst of all of that, there's this beam of light in the school of the prophets, these men of God. And it's been pointed out that whenever God is sending men, specifically called men to be pastors and teachers and leaders, prophets in this case, throughout all of history, it's what we call a high water mark in a history of a people, is when God is sending men there to do a work, a ministry work, as it were. So that being said, awesome that they are experiencing a growth problem, right? They're saying there isn't room enough. We're all crammed in here. It's less than ideal. Why don't we go and why don't we expand? And I just take note of you that with you, that is the ultimate sense of what's going on here, is that there's a work that's going on in this school of the prophets where headquarters are too small and they got to expand. And that's a wonderful thing, I think. I always think of it like taking ground for Christ or for the Lord, right? It's an awesome thing. In the world today, it's so sad to me to think that churches are shutting their doors and selling their properties off to, fill in the blank, to pubs, to brothels in Europe that's happened, barber shops, wine and spirit shops. I mean, this is what happened here in America. Our church doors are closing, we're selling property. So to me, it's always an awesome thing when God's work is happening in such a way where expansion is happening. It's so exciting. And so that's what's going on with these guys. There's so much work that's going on. They're like, we need to expand, we need to build. And so they decide to move outside of sort of the main hub of, let's imagine it to be Jericho at those days. But what's interesting about the axe head thing, just a couple notes so we can move on. In verse 5, it says that it was borrowed. Now, to be specific, it could be that it's implied that it was asked for, which means it wasn't necessarily borrowed in the sense that he was going to give it back, but that he wanted this for a long time and finally got it. He finally attained the thing he had been trying to get for a long time. Whether that's the case, that's also important to him, of course. In those days, it's not like you go down to like Tractor Supply and get a new axe tomorrow. It wasn't like that. It was very rare to have your own axe head like this. And so it's interesting to note, though, if he was borrowing this axe and he lost the axe head, which is the most crucial part, Exodus 14 lays this out specifically, that if you borrowed something from someone and you damaged it or lost it, it was your job to replace it. And that's just good morals, isn't it? Good ethics, which is always a real gamble when you borrow something from a friend. You gotta weigh it out. Is it really worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Because maybe you've experienced it. I know I have years ago. I was so cheap I wouldn't buy a push mower. I was like, it's like $200. I'm not going to do that. So I borrowed my friend's, hit a stump, broke his crankshaft, bought him a new one, and then bought me a new one. So just buy your own. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's like the solution sometimes. Anyway, Exodus 14 says if you're going to do this and borrow something, just know you're going to be liable for it. And so that's all spelled out. So this guy probably is in trouble in that sense if he did borrow it. But last thing before we move on, look how cool this is. We see this all through the scriptures. Once again, God does his part. man does his part. God's part, make the axe head float. Man's part, reach in and get it, right? God's part and man's part. It's not just God doing everything, and it's not just man doing everything. It's God doing only what he can do and us doing the part that we can contribute. Always so important we remember that. We would never want to touch his glory and say, we made the axe head float. No, you didn't. You picked it up. That's all you did. You got the axe head out of the water. So there's that. Now, verse 8. It says, now the king of Syria was making war against Israel. And he consulted with his servants, saying, my camp will be in such and such a place. And the man of God sent to the king of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. And then the king of Israel sent someone to the place which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him. And he was watchful there, not just once or twice. It just kept happening over and over again. And therefore, in verse 11, the heart of the king of Syria was greatly troubled by this thing. And he called his servants and he said to them, will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? Like, who's the rat? Who's telling our business here? So verse 12, one of his servants said, no, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet who is in Israel, he tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom, like when you're singing in your shower, man, he's listening, I'm telling you. So verse 13, he said, well, go and see where this man is, so I can send and get him. And it was told him, saying, surely he's in Dothan. Therefore, in verse 14, he sent horses and chariots and a great army there. And they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered in verse 16, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray you open his eyes that he may see. And then the Lord opened his eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots and fire all around Elijah. So horses of fire all around Elisha and protecting them. So thing to note here, as Jehoram is the king now in Samaria, in what is called the kingdom of Israel at this point, it's not that he's very fond of Jehoram. It's not that he cares to help Jehoram, other than Jehoram is overseeing God's people, is the idea. And so what Elisha keeps doing is warning them of all the moves that the king of Syria is making. It gets so crazy that the king of Syria, it bothers him. He's like, who is ratting us out? Who's telling our business here, man? Who's working for him? Who's the double agent? And someone's like, look, man, I don't know how to tell you this. It isn't any of us. There's a prophet that just somehow always knows what you're thinking and tells them. That's what's going on here. Truly awesome that this is what's going on behind the scenes. So he says, well, let's just go get this guy and take him off the map. That's the way that this works. And so as they surround his house, you got to imagine, like, you are pretty well helpless at that point. I've often thought about it like, we have a gun or a weapon to protect ourselves at home, which is all fine and good if one man breaks into your house. But if 3 or 4 guys break into your house, I mean, you better be like Rambo, Bruce Lee, and Chuck Norris all wrapped into one, right, in order to accomplish something like that. So how incredible when your house is surrounded. I mean, just if anything else, and we can't relate to this passage, put yourself in the prophet Elisha's shoes. Your house is surrounded by men in military vehicles. And they've got, like, they're masked up, they got all the weaponry and the armory, and you're like, well, this is the end of the road. I mean, there's no clear path forward, right? And what's amazing to me is that Elisha is at absolute peace in God's calling. I mean, probably at the end of the day, he figures, well, if I'm on my way out, I'm on my way out. This is what God's called me to do. But he's at such peace to know that this isn't his end. He's so in sync with what God is having him do that he's not worried about it at all. And partially because he sees the spiritual reality, and he is constantly aware of that reality. That, yes, there's the physical reality all around us. And if your house is truly physically surrounded, that's physically terrifying. But if God is going to protect you spiritually, you're all set. And we're going to see this play out in the next chapter. But understand that the servant does not see it the same way, and he is freaking out. And so he just prays, Lord, let him see the spiritual realm. And the moment that he can see the spiritual realm, he realizes that they're all set, right? That God is working on their behalf. He's going to do something. So just take note of this, that he opens up his spiritual eyes. We'll see this in a moment. So in verse 18, when the Syrians came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Strike this people, I pray, with blindness." And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Now Elisha said to them, "This is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I'll bring you to the man whom you're seeking." But he led them to Samaria. And so it was, when they had come to Samaria, that Elisha said, "Lord, open the eyes of these men, that they may see." And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and they were inside Samaria. Now when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, "My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" But he answered, and he said, "You shall not kill them. Would you kill those whom you had taken captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master." And then he prepared a great feast for them, and after they ate and drank, he sent them away, and they went to their master. And this is the key verse. So the bands of the Syrian raiders came no more into the land of Israel. These mercenaries were so blown away by it. They're like, "We're out of here. This is crazy." Now, some things to take note of here, because it's just so incredible. First of all, Elisha prays. And I just want to remind us of that tonight, that prayer is actually effective, right? Prayer is not a waste of time. And I've said it before, and I say it again. It is a way that we can communicate to God and to ourselves and to the world around us that we truly believe in God, right? When you and I pray, if God is not real, we are sitting in our closet, in a room, by ourselves, talking to ourselves. That is strange. Unless God is real, right? And so prayer is effective. It actually does something. God actually moves in the affairs of men when you pray. When I pray. Otherwise, we're left to our own devices and just doing it our way and trying to figure out everything ourselves. And you're more than free to do that if you want, but we also can appeal to the God of heaven who made everything and can do anything. So that's the ultimate blank check. So it's like, well, Lord, would you do this? Would you do that? It's worth asking, I would imagine. So Elisha prays, and remember, he prayed that a man would be given spiritual sight. And then he turns around and prays that these men would lose their physical sight. And God answers both of those prayers. God is into doing both of those, taking sight and giving sight. He can do that. Now, what is interesting is the deception in verse 19, and that's exactly what it is. They are there for him. And now they're blind. They're at his mercy. And you can mess with a blind person. Case in point, in the Levitical law, the children of Israel were forbidden to mess with blind people. It's right there in the scripture. But what is interesting is there's a technical truth that there is a man that they need to see. But it's not who they're looking. They're ultimately looking for Elisha. So it's technically true, but at the end of the day, it's deceptive. And all I can say is I appreciate this. I can appreciate the sentiment and the humor from Elisha, just saying, "Hey, come with me. I'll show you the guy you need to talk to." And they're blind. They're kind of easy targets at that point, right? They're desperate. Just take us wherever we need to go. And he brings them to the king. They can all of a sudden see, and then they realize they're in the belly of the beast. That's terrible. Now, the roles have reversed, haven't they? They were surrounding Elisha, and this was going to be like an easy day for them. Now, they are surrounded by their enemy, and they're in the midst of all of it. And I've often said the "I told you so" is never worth it. I mean, for me personally, I don't know about you, but when people are like, "I know, you're going to say I told you so," I always say I don't ever want to say that because it's never worth it. By the time that I have to say I told you so, great devastation has happened. So that's an awesome "I told you so" moment, though, isn't it? Like, look at you guys now. Look at where you're at. Told you. Well, no. But he's not vindictive, and he's not using this opportunity to do anything other than to bless these men, just like we're commanded to do in the New Testament. Love those enemies of yours, those that curse you and spitefully use you. I wish it said punch them right in the throat, don't you? I was like, wouldn't that be an awesome verse? Matthew 17, verse 7 says that, don't you know it? It doesn't say that. It's like, love those that despitefully use you and pray for them. What? And so what is Elisha's strategy? Is I told you so and setting them up and I got you. No. He brings them into this situation. They are completely helpless at this point. And then the king's like, can I kill him? Can I kill him? And he said, no, you can't kill these guys. I want you to feed them. I want you to feed them. Now here's what's awesome. It's counterintuitive, but so is so much of the Bible and everything God commands from us because we're sinful by nature, so it's always counterintuitive, right? And by feeding these guys, the ultimate accomplishment has been made. Again, they could have threatened them. They could have tortured them to some extent. They didn't do any of that. What's crazy is what is far more effective is being kind and loving them. That's what's strange, isn't it? It's like you would think by grabbing them, I'll kill you if you ever come on my property again and do something like that. I'll mess you up. He doesn't do that. He's like, no, let it go. Just feed these guys and send them on their way. Nothing else, leave them alone. They leave that place, and the ultimate result is it says these band of marauders never came back. And I'm going to go ahead and just go out on a limb here a little bit and believe that part of it was they probably thought that was the strangest day of their lives, don't you think? As they were like, hey, you guys want to go back? No, man, that was like the Bermuda Triangle or something, man. What in the world was that all about, you know? We went to dig, we were blind, and then he fed us? That's the weirdest part. That creeps me out, that he fed us and we ate and then we left. No, I ain't going back there. I think that's what's awesome about the whole story. Instead of beating them, threatening them, fighting them, feed them and send them on their way. And you know what the New Testament says that's like when you do that to your enemy? It's like heaping hot coals of fire on them. Now, a lot of people love that analogy because they think it's like literally like you have this symbolic sense of pouring hot coals on your enemy's head. No, that's not what you're doing. See, in the ancient times, if your fire went out, it was quite a production before matches weren't even invented until Abraham Lincoln's time. I don't remember the date exactly, but when Abraham Lincoln was a boy, they were invented. So 1840s or something like that, maybe. But my point is that fires were hard to make. So the best way you could start a fire was going to your neighbor's house and, hey, can I have some coal? Yeah, I'll take your coal and start my fire with it. So by heaping coals on your enemy, what you were doing is you were blessing them. You were giving them the ability to survive and thrive and do something kind to them. So how incredibly strange when your enemy comes to you and then you give them the ability to thrive or survive. It's just an awesome thing. So let's take every opportunity to do that, shall we? To bless those that curse us and do good to those that spitefully use us, those kinds of things. Because that's more confounding than you yelling like red face at them, right? And I'm just old enough now to know that doesn't work with people. Like I'm going to scream the skin off your bones of how mad I am at you and how much you drive me crazy. And I've never seen someone say, oh yeah, you're right. I should repent now. They don't do that. They're like, yeah. And then they double down. And then I double down. And then I've never done that. That's something that you guys would do. But you know what I mean? Like for you weirdos that do that kind of stuff. It's just amazing. You get so much more accomplished with kindness, really. Be that in any relationship. You know, they say it's hard to fight with someone that won't punch back. You ever notice that? It feels bad. You can punch only so often, and then you're just like, it's just kind of weird, punching somebody and fighting back. So verse 24, even though the mercenaries are out of the picture, the king of Syria is not done. That's the whole idea. So verse 24, it happened after this that Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, gathered all his army and went up and besieged Samaria. And there was a great famine in Samaria. Indeed, they besieged it until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and 1/4 of a cob of dove dung is sold for 5 shekels of silver. I don't care how much that is actually worth. It's not worth a nickel as far as I'm concerned. So if it's a nickel, it's too high. Verse 26. Then, as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him and said, help my lord, O king. And he said, if the Lord does not help you, where can I find help from you? And from the threshing floor to the winepress. And then the king said to her, what is troubling you? And she answered, well, this woman said to me, give your son that we may eat him today, and then we'll eat my son tomorrow. Well, in verse 29, we boiled my son and ate him, and I said to her on the next day, give your son that we may eat of him. But she hid her son. Now it happened when the king heard these words of this woman, that he tore his clothes and he passed by on the wall. And people looked, and there underneath he had sackcloth on his body. And then he said, God do so to me and more also, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on him today. That's crazy, isn't it? Blame the one godly man. Isn't that so classic of evil, sinful people? We're going to blame the Christians for it. It's the Christians' fault that this stuff's happening. Oh, how interesting. But in verse 32, Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. And the king sent a man ahead of him, but before the messengers came to him, he said to the elders, do you see how this son of a murderer has sent someone to take away my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold him fast at the door. Is not that the sound of his master's feet behind him? And while he was still talking with them, there was the messenger coming down to him. And then the king said, surely this calamity is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer? Now, a lot for us to consider there, of course, and those many verses, of course. But let's go back and think about some of the things we just read here for a moment. How utterly devastating this famine has become. And that's the whole point of a siege, by the way, in ancient cities. When you surrounded the city, there was no way for them to get import or export happening, right? They couldn't get anything in. And so a lot of times, if your water source was outside the city, you were doomed early, very quickly. But that's why when we've toured even in Israel and stuff, you go to like Tel Megiddo, they had a huge well inside of the city that was impenetrable from outside, could not be affected from outside. So having a main water source that was inside the city was always so crucial. Having a food source and these kinds of things in ancient times, so important. But after so long, eventually you run out of food and people have to start getting creative, right? And as we're reading here, they're selling donkey's heads. I mean, I'm never, as far as I'm concerned, in the market for a donkey head for dinner. Maybe you guys are. I don't know. You're pretty not unaffected by that. I would never buy a donkey head for dinner. I'm just going to go ahead and say that one more time. In fact, I've never bought a donkey head for dinner. All right, I'll leave it alone. So they're buying donkey's heads, dove dung. I mean, this is wild. But then when it gets real bad is when this woman walks by and she's devastated and she says, listen, we ate my kid yesterday and now it's time for her to offer up her kid so we can eat her child, and she's hid the child from me. The king is just so overwhelmed by how devastating this has become that he tears his clothes, and underneath him he's already prepared himself in sackcloth. It's so bad. Now, a couple of things. Okay, first of all, Deuteronomy chapter 28 warned the people of Israel about this. That's the famous blessing and cursing chapter, which is amazing that the list of blessing is very short and the warnings of the cursing is very long. To tell them, do not forsake me. Do not serve other gods. Do not go after pagan practices. If you do, here's all the blanks that are going to be filled in for you. And God held nothing back. He didn't make it ambiguous or vague, like, I'll do some bad stuff. I'm really going to rattle your cage. No. He spelled out everything. I'll withhold the rain. I'll do all of these things. On that list of things, he explicitly says in Deuteronomy 28, you can read it tonight, he says that you will eat the flesh of your children in famine. Like, could not have been clearer. So my point in saying that is that when the king rips his clothes and says, how could it be this bad? Well, here's the thing, pal, and this is for every one of us. It doesn't have to be that bad. Right? I mean, every human being that's ever lived, as far as I can fathom, has done something like this. They've made a wreck of their lives. They're reaping the consequences. Like, how could God let this happen to me? How could you do this with your life is the real question. But we don't ask that, do we? We say, why, God? And I remember one time hearing a heroin addict just fresh off the drugs. And he said, isn't it interesting? This is amazing insight. That whenever something good happens, we thank our lucky stars. But when something bad happens, we call it an act of God. Wow. Like a tree had fallen on his house, and the insurance company called it an act of God. He says, why is it when something bad happens, we call it an act of God, but when something good in our lives happens, we thank our lucky stars? It's an interesting thought. But when things are really good, no one ever gets mystified by God. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Plenty of Christians, godly people do. But most people don't. A lot of people don't. Let's just say it like that. What I mean is, don't we find it pretty natural when things are going pretty terribly? I can't believe you, God. I'm really struggling with God right now. And then He let all this stuff happen in my life. But you ever notice, when your life is at the absolute top and everything's going the way you want, you don't stop and think, I can't believe that God would let all this awesome stuff happen to me. I'm really struggling with Him right now. You ever notice that? We only struggle with God when He doesn't do the things we want Him to do, in the way that we want Him to do it. Not when He's doing awesome stuff, when He's blessing us beyond measure. We're not like, hold on, I'm challenging you right now, Lord. I'm worried about you. Isn't that just human nature? I've said it over the years, I'll say it again. It's amazing to me as a pastor, sometimes my job is to give people ministry, to give them a responsibility. But it's also my job to take it away from people at times. For disqualification, bad attitude, divisiveness, you can fill in the blank. And over the years I've observed as a pastor, it's much like that thing I just talked about with our relationship with God. When I give people that opportunity, as I feel led, or if I'm on behalf of a leadership team, hey, we want you to do this for the Lord and for the church. People are like, woohoo! I'm so humbled, I'm so honored. And they thank you endlessly. But when you go to them and say, hey, it's not working out, or we're going to take this from you, they're irate. And I've heard this over the years. I'm really struggling with you, and I'm really doubting you, and all these things that they have, all these concerns that they have about the pastor or the leadership team at that point, all of a sudden. And again, I've always noticed it's never when you go to them and offer them the ministry, it's when you take it away from them. When you offer them the ministry, no one's like, whoa, I'm a little concerned for you right now. Do you know what you're doing? Are you really sure that you know what you're doing? Isn't that the case of human nature? When something good comes our way, it's receive it, no problem. But when something challenging happens that we don't like or agree with, all of a sudden we're critical and skeptical of things. And so my point is, this king is overtly blown away that this stuff is happening. But here's the thing that's so important for us to know. God doesn't want this to happen. God wants to spare people, right? He wants to spare us, you and I. It's not like God is this guy upstairs that's just so angry and He doesn't want us to have a good time and He's going to do everything He can to stop us from having a good time. It's He knows what will hurt us and destroy us, and He says, don't do these things. Because when you do them, here will be the fallout from them. Every older person can relate to this in this room. You tell young people what to do and they're like, nah, I think I'll try it myself. Oh, go ahead. You know what I mean? I'm just telling you what is going to happen, man. I'm telling you. No, maybe for everyone else that's ever lived, but not me. Okay, go ahead. And that's not without warning. It's not without warning. God has warned them of this very thing. And now it's happening, and mind blown. But maybe a good reminder of the beautiful faithfulness of God for sure, but also the stark and scary reminder of sin itself. The old saying goes like this: sin will take you farther than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay. The front end of sin is pretty awesome. That's the one thing about church we got to be careful of. We're not trying to scare our kids out of sin. We want to tell them the realities of it. But even Moses in Acts chapter 7 says he forsook the pleasures of this life in sinfulness. There's things in life that are pleasurable that are completely sinful. And we do a disservice to our young people, to church people, when we say, oh, if you do that, it'll be horrible. Well, ultimately it will be. But the honest and fair assessment is there is a pleasurable season in all things. If you've never done drugs a day in your life and you went out tomorrow and did some drugs in moderation, and you did it in a feasible way, you'd probably have a wonderful time. You'd think, whoa, this is great. The feeling that I'm having is so amazing. But the problem is when you're addicted and you're in chains and you have to do it, and it's not like the first day when you were in control. When you're out of control and you've lost all your good relationships in life and everything's gone, it's not fun anymore, but you're still doing it. See, the first day, the first few weeks, the first few months, maybe even the first few years or something, really fun. Promiscuity. Oh man, you could have so much fun with that. But then when you get the AIDS diagnosis, it's like, oh, this ain't fun anymore. You know, you could go down the list of all the things that God tells us not to do. And can be really fun for a season. Not forever, though. And God warns his people. God tries to spare us of these things. Just like an older person would try to spare a young person from just an obviously stupid decision. But that is the answer for the king, is that if you knew the law, which the king of Israel was supposed to, by the way, the first order of business for a king in Israel was to copy the law down. So you wouldn't be far at it before you're writing down Deuteronomy 28 and saying, note taken, never follow pagan worship, right? But if the king of Israel isn't doing that, pretty good chance he's not going to ever read that. Now, here's one more thing in this chapter before we go into chapter 7. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer is the last statement from the king. As the king is there trying to confront him, why should I wait on the Lord any longer? Okay, first of all, let's be honest and be real. Have you even actually waited on the Lord? I'll give you an example. I personally know of someone in my life. I'll just try to be so vague and ambiguous. None of you would have any recollection or connection to this person at all, but just for absolute safekeeping, I'm just going to tell you I know of a man or a person. And actually, it was a woman. I have to tell you that aspect of it, okay? So it was a woman, all right? And she was just a flat-out bad girl, if you want to call it that. Just bad. Lived like godless, man. Terrible. And decades and decades into this lifestyle that she's chosen for herself and just ruined her life. She finally says, I had enough. I'm tired of being the good girl. It's time for me to be the bad girl. I'm thinking, what have you always been? You've always been the bad girl. What are you talking about? Time for me to be the bad girl now. What? When have you ever been a good girl? But isn't that what am I going to keep waiting on the Lord? Have you ever waited on the Lord? Are you going to keep waiting on the Lord? How about when are you going to start waiting on the Lord, man? You ain't waiting on the Lord. What did the guy say to the woman? How am I supposed to help you? If ain't God ain't helping you, what do I know? That ain't a guy that's waiting on the Lord and expecting him to do anything. That being said, he's ready to give up. He's ready to be done. He's like, why don't we just turn ourselves over to the Syrians? I've been expecting any day to be delivered from the Syrians. And there is an element that he's saying from the Lord. But, and I've said it before, I say it to myself tonight. It's one thing to think that you've prayed about something. It's a whole other thing to actually do it. And the reason I think we're guilty of thinking we've prayed is because we've complained about it. And God's not interested in complaints. He's interested in prayers. You notice that? He wants you to pray and say, hey, Lord, here are my complaints. Help me to see them the right way. Help me to see them the way that you see them, and so on and so forth. But because we complain, we think we pray. And this guy's like, I've been waiting every day for this thing to be over. Well, are you really waiting on the Lord, though? But here's the thing I want to say to all of us. And this is just a good reminder tonight, man. We don't want to quit before the deliverance or the victory, so to speak. I'm going to quote a few things from Chuck Smith tonight, all of them worthy in my book. One of them is a story he told because of California and the gold rush and then search for oil and all sorts of things. He talks about a oil drilling company, a big fancy, all the bank money behind it, came into this area and they were convinced there was oil in this area in California. I don't remember the specifics. It was just a story that Chuck Smith told from the local area, so it was a well-known thing there in California. And so Pastor Chuck tells the story about how they were drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling. And all this fancy equipment, they got nowhere. So they finally, after just endless drilling, they gave up. They were so irate and they had lost so much money that they went to the local scrapyard and sold everything for like pennies on the dollar to a scrapyard guy. That scrapyard guy took all that equipment back over and he drilled 4 more inches and struck this huge vein of oil. and was like rich beyond anyone's imagination. But when you hear that story, just remember that he was 4 inches away. They were 4 inches away, and what did they threw in the towel? That's it, never going to get anywhere, never accomplishing anything. And just remember this. If God's called you to do something, just drill, baby, drill. You know what I mean? That's a little bit of political stuff there for you too. If God calls you to do something, it don't really matter what it is, just keep on a smashing, you know? And I know how tough ledge can be. We live in the state of ledge. Do you know that? The state of ledge, the way that ledge should be, right? Here in the state of Maine. Our whole state is riddled with it. You drive around and you see it. It's everywhere. The state is riddled with ledge. And so often in building, you'll be confronted with ledge. And there's a lot of machinery that can move a lot of ledge, but I am persuaded that it's really fun to do it by hand too. And it's a lot slower and a lot more painful. But if you just keep on smashing a ledge, it will eventually break. But it's amazing to see the different personalities that get behind a hammer and try to smash that ledge and how quickly one would give up versus the other. There are some people that say, I will not stop until this ledge is broken. There's another that says, I hit it once and it didn't break. That's a little bit much for me. All I'm saying to you is this, just keep on smashing, right? Keep on hitting it. Keep on doing it. Keep on drilling. Whatever God calls you to do, do not give up. Do not give up. Do not give the enemy the satisfaction, and don't ever have to wake up. Because here's the thing. If we stop and we quit in whatever endeavor it is for God, whatever that thing is, you are guaranteeing failure. But by continuing on, you leave the door open for success, don't you? You leave the door open for God to move. And that's the most important part, is giving God the opportunity to work. Giving him the chance to do something. The moment you stop, you limit what God could and would do in that situation with you. Now, that will play in nicely in just a moment, so let's read on. Chapter 7 is Elisha's response. It says, hear the word of the Lord. And for a discouraged heart, that's a wonderful thing. God has something to say to you. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow, about this time, a sheah of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. So in verse 2, an officer on whose hand the king leaned against answered the man of God and said, look, if the Lord would make the windows in heaven, could this thing be? And Elisha said, in fact, you're going to see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it. You'll see it with your eyes, but you won't taste of it with your mouth, man. That's because this man has unbelief, right? And you've heard me say before, can't, never, could. This man is filled with unbelief. There's no way he can rationalize how that could ever happen. Let us never try to limit God on our rationality, right? Like what we can accomplish in our minds. I mean, it's obviously a smart thing to do. You don't want to be a fool completely. But let's not limit God and what he can do, right? Unreal. So, we need to read on. So it says, there were 4 leprous men at the entrance of the gate, and they said to one another, why are we sitting here until we die? If we say we will enter the city, the famine is in the city, and we shall die in there. And if we sit here, we also die. Now therefore come, let us surrender to the army of the Syrians. If they keep us alive, we shall live. If they kill us, we're going to die. And so in verse 5, they rose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians. And when they had come to the outskirts of the Syrian camp, to their surprise, no one was there. So in verse 6, for the Lord had caused the army of the Syrians to hear the noise of the chariots and the noise of horses and the noise of a great army. So they said one to another, look, the king of Israel's hired against us, the king also of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to attack us. Therefore, in verse 7, they arose and they fled at twilight and left the camp intact and their tents, their horses, their donkeys, and they fled for their lives. And so in verse 8, when these lepers came to the outskirts of the camp, they went into one tent and ate and drank, and they carried from it silver and gold and clothing, and they went and hid them, and then they came back and entered another tent and carried some from there also and went and hid it. So these lepers are having the time of their lives. This is incredible. They're eating their stuff. They take all the good stuff. They hide that. They're going to do it again. And we've all experienced that, right? There was a coffee cup that one time that said, too much of a good thing is a good thing, right? That's not true, though. Too much of a good thing will just spoil your belly, right? You can love a particular sweet, and you can eat it for a while, and then it's like, I don't ever want to see that ever again in my life. For me, you want to know what it is for me before we end tonight? I'm not telling you. No, I'm just kidding. Texas Roadhouse rolls. And that butter, come on. And here's what I found. You ready for this? Here's what I found. If I'm like we're all on a diet, but if I'm being disciplined, I'm not eating that bread tonight. I am disciplined. I am only eating a small steak, and this is it. And what's amazing is, on a normal night, when you're like, I am so ready for these rolls, I haven't eaten in a month, I'm ready. They bring out like one roll, they're like, sorry, we're running a little dry tonight, can you all split this up? And you're like, there's like, no, I wanted 100 of these tonight, what are you doing? But have you noticed that when you're trying to do good, and they're like, oh, hold on, we have so much, we'd like to bring out a truckload of rolls and just dump them on your table, is that okay? You're like, well, I guess I am going to have one tonight after all, aren't I? This is incredible. But anyway, too much of a good thing. It's like, but I've also got to the point where I've eaten so many of those rolls, I thought I could eat and never stop. And then you eat and you're like, if I ever see a Texas Roadhouse roll again, I will hit it like a baseball. I hate these rolls. I hate them. I've eaten so much. We can all do that. These lepers have that experience. They're so satisfied that it's like nauseating. It's like, okay, now we're more than satisfied. But let's go back and think of a few things with these lepers. And I am so fascinated with these guys and their logic. And that's exactly the thing we want to talk about. And again, something that brings me to Chuck Smith. Hearing a Bible study from him, he says, if only more churches had this line of thinking. Why are we going to sit here until we die? Now, I take for granted maybe you haven't been part of or been close enough to or seen a dying church, but it is a sad thing to watch a fruitful, healthy church dwindle and dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. They start selling off stuff, and there's just like a small, tiny group of people there, and they're just so committed to hanging on because they've always had that, power or whatever it is. And there's no fruit, there's no baptisms, there's no new people, there's nothing. And Chuck Smith says, if more churches just had the mindset, why don't we just get up and try something different? Because otherwise we're just going to die as it is. That's a profound thing for every one of us. Why just sit here and die? So, that being said, let me say a few things about our spiritual lives. Number one, sometimes there's things, just don't overthink them, right? And I'm saying, hopefully this helps you, it helps me a lot. Don't overthink things too much. And don't over-spiritualize things too much. I know, like when you first get saved, sometimes you're like, Lord, do you want me to eat a ham sandwich or a turkey sandwich? And he's like, I don't care. Please just eat, right? We're like, I want to be so in sync with what God... Don't over-spiritualize. Rationalize sometimes. Just use your rational brain. In fact, it's one of my favorite quotes from David Guzik that basically says, God has given you the rational mind. That's what he wants you to do, is use it. Use your ration. And rationale and think, what should I do in this? Oh, well, God's given me the wisdom. This is what I perceive to be the right direction to go. Don't over-spiritualize it. There was something that happened to me that forever changed me. And when I think about this tonight, I cannot help but think about it. And maybe it'll help you too. Many of you know who Pastor Ken Graves is at this point. Awesome man of God, right? Not just because he has a really cool voice, like mine. No, he's actually got such great content with that voice. And you put those two things together and it's a powerhouse. But he's a brilliant man, is what I mean to say. And I'm not trying to go on and on, but listen. I have been so amazed at the times in which you would expect him to drone on or really elaborate on something, and he says next to nothing or nothing at all. Like, I expect a phone call, and he never calls you back. And you're like, the more time you have alone with that, you're like, yeah, I didn't really need to talk to him anyway. And then the Lord gives you the answer. I mean, there's things like that have happened over the years. There's one story, though, where I was pouring something out to him. I was telling him this vision, this plan we had, and all these things that we were going to do, and how it was going to incorporate, and maybe that the CRD program could benefit from it. All this stuff, man. I was just kind of laying it on. And I was really convinced of it. And you know what he said to me? 2 words. Didn't even say 3 words. I was hoping it'd be 3. Looking at it, I'm like, that could be 3 words. It's only 2. He just wrote back, not even we'll see. Oh, no, you don't. No. We will see is at least 3 words. You could have done that. We'll see. And you know, that has stuck with me ever since then. You and I can all say, I'm so called, I got this big thing going on. You can pour it out to your friend, and we all expect our friends, whoa. We'll see. And you know, at the time, I was like, man, that's like really like, I just laid out an awesome thing and a great opportunity. We'll see. And you know what's amazing about it? I'm here today to testify. That thing never really got off the ground. By looks of it, it was going to be like an airplane that took off across the ocean and landed perfectly. It never even got off the ground, and it completely crashed and burned. And I kept hearing, we'll see. We'll see. You know what he was doing? Using logic. Maybe, maybe not. Where's the big spiritual pastoral answer? God in heaven, and he's called thee to this important opportunity. We'll see. We'll see. Is God in it? We'll see. So these guys are like, well, here's the options. We can stay here and die, or we can go there and die, but there's a small chance that in going there, we might live. Let's go with that option. Let's go with it. Trying to live, maybe dying in the process, is better in their book than just dying here and now. Awesome concept for every one of us tonight. You can sit here and die. You can let the thing die. Or you can at least try and see what God might do. Again, giving God an opportunity to do a work. Now, for the sake of time, I'm just going to summarize, as we do from time to time, these last few sections. From verse 9 down to verse 15, we read on about how these lepers are so convicted that they go to the guard and they say, listen, here's the deal. The guards go and tell the king. The king thinks it's a setup. He's like, no way, man. This is just a big setup to get us out there. And then the Syrians are going to come back and they're going to attack us while we're eating in the tents. It's all a big setup. So with that, let me say a couple things. They end up sending out some messengers and verifying that this is a true situation. But here's the thing about the king. He's so skeptical, and it goes in line with what we were just talking about. He doesn't expect God to work at all. You notice there's no part of him, if you were to read that passage, there's no part of him that's like, well, maybe the Lord is in that. We'll see. Maybe God is in that. Nope. He is like, there's no way this could be. Well, you just heard from a prophet that this was going to happen. You heard from the prophet, you're all going to fill your bellies tomorrow. It's going to be amazing. And the first time you hear word of it, you're like, and this is the man, remember the man that's waiting on the Lord? Are you really waiting on the Lord when clearly the Lord shows up in the most powerful, amazing way? And you're like, I don't know. We'll have to see about that. Well, he didn't expect anything from God. It was unexpected. So again, Chuck Smith. Chuck Smith said some things that really confound me, man. And one of them was, I just expect God to bless me every day with this big smile. I'm like, what kind of crazy person says something like that? You expect God to bless you every day? And he did. He expected God to bless him every day. And what's crazy is he did. And what's amazing is we can all do that. We can expect God to bless us, or we can expect God to punish us and make us suffer and make life hard. Or we can see in every day looking and expecting God somewhere in all that to bless us. Lord, I'm expecting you to bless me today. It brings up a George Mueller quote, and he said this: there are few children of God that doubt his ability to give, but many doubt his willingness. There are few children of God that doubt his ability to give, but many who doubt his willingness. Isn't that amazing? If you were to really sit down theologically, you and I would agree, God is able. God is able. And you and I would go, yeah, he's able. He can do it. Does he want to? Why do we struggle so much with that? We think God is reluctant, right? We think God's reluctant to give and bless and love. Not if you're Chuck Smith. I just expect God to bless me every day. We could do that. We could expect more from God. We could expect more blessing from God for sure. This king expects nothing from God, clearly. Now, a good challenge is what the lepers actually say, by the way. And just for the record, there's an old Jewish tradition that Gehazi, who was struck with leprosy, and his sons, his descendants would be as well. They believe that this was Gehazi and 3 of his sons. Interesting thought, nothing necessarily true. But here's what they say in verse 9. This day is a day of good news. How can we remain silent? But don't you and I, the gospel by definition, the very word gospel means good news, right? We have good news to share with the world. How can we remain silent? We have good news to share. How can we remain silent? Now, last section, last thing here. Basically, the king goes out, finds it just as it was, and twice it tells us, as the word of the Lord prophesied. First of all, that the Lord prophesied the amount of money of things would be sold for. They're sold for the exact amount of money that he prophesied, number one. Number two is the man that doubted it. He saw it with his eyes. He was the gatekeeper. He opened up the gate and he let the people through. They were so excited they trampled him to death on the way out. So he saw it with his eyes. He never tasted it with his mouth, just like God said. So to which I'll just say that God's word never fails, right? And William MacDonald said, unbelief robs its victims of blessings and rewards them with death. Unbelief robs its victims of blessings and rewards them with death. We have a very unhealthy thing in our society today where we think very negatively all of the time. It's the way that we're programmed. It's the way that the world works. It's the way that media works. We're very much negative and critical so much of the time. Case in point, go home tonight and say, I had the most glorious experience at church. The message was fire like always. Something like that. And the worship time was amazing and the fellowship meal was great. Something brief like that. One thumbs up from your homie, right? Now go home and write, I just saw the most amazing accident out front. I think there's flames, ... What's going to happen to your Facebook that night? Hold on, who is it? Where are you? What's going on? How are you doing? Why does everyone cares about the negative stuff? They don't care about the positive stuff. We have a very unhealthy, negative mind and thinking in our society today. That's why it's so important we wash our minds with the water of God's word, isn't it? And we remind ourselves that there's something to believing that God is not only able, but he is willing to do great things in and through us.